I just had this conversation with my kids this morning on the way to school. Paying attention.
Yeah.
Paying attention to the world, knowing what's going on. Don't take anything for granted. You know, you never know what's going to come up, what's going to hit you, where your next opportunity is going to be, where danger is. Pay attention.
Absolutely. That's some solid shit. When you look back at history, it's so sad of how we discriminated and pushed people out of not giving them rights there.
Well, you have to think the whole concept of rights is only about 300 years old. So, you know, if you go back to the Middle Ages and you start talking about human rights, nobody would have the foggiest idea what you're talking
about. That's
definitely not in Rome. That's for sure. I struggle with the fact that, I mean, even in my own schooling, the idea of you had to memorize names and dates when it came to history. And I hated that because the story is what's more important, right? And understanding what happened first and what happened next and why things happen and how you go from one event to the next event to the next event and those dominoes is what needs to be learned. And being able to analyze that and think about how that applies to today. And you can do that with literature, you can do that with history, you can do that with math, you can do that with science, right? It all requires you to be able to look at something that happened before and analyze how that applies to today. And the fact that they are not teaching that to our children is handicapping them. And you get an entire generation. This was literally our last video. You have an entire generation who doesn't know that AI doesn't have all the answers. And so you literally have a lawyer who uses AI to generate a brief and submits it to the judge. And the judge is like, these cases don't exist. Well, we didn't realize that because we were just using AI and we didn't realize AI didn't have a real argument. I mean, you're lawyers, guys. You're supposed to be the smartest of us all. How do you not know that you have to double check it? It's not infallible.
Talk about laziness. It's like you got somebody helping you. The least you could do is recheck the work. It's like, yeah, but that's your truth. I'm like, what? She's like, well, yeah, but that's your truth. It's not my truth. It's a fact. It's that one truth. And she's like, no. My truth is, and she said whatever she said. I'm like, no, that's not your truth. That's your belief. A truth can't be right. There's only one truth. Like you can say the sky is green and you say that, oh, that's my truth, but it's not really your truth. That's your opinion, and opinion and belief can be wrong. But when you say that's the truth, no, the truth is the sky is blue and that's it. That is the truth. So I believe there's only one truth. Larissa, are you with that opinion?
Absolutely. I do agree that we can't know the truth for every little whatever. Nobody knows how the universe was started, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We have a really good guess, but nobody knows. Nobody can say with 100% absolute proof, and they can't go back and say, well, here, I've got this video of the start of the world, right? Like, it doesn't exist. So we have to take that based off of faith. That's not a truth. That's why they call it the theory, the Big Bang theory, right? The theory of evolution, the theory of
gravity,
whatever, right?
Yep.
Aside from the fact that I think only Hollywood can write a good president.
That's so true.
I mean, like, they always know exactly what to say in Hollywood. Like, you know, you see a president, you see a political person, and they're very easy to see who's the bad guy and who's the good guy, because the bad guy is always doing the sneaky stuff and underhanded stuff and is two-faced, whereas the good guy is always with integrity and says the right thing at the right time with the exact right words. And I feel like it's not realistic, because that clear black and white, where I love it in movies, don't get me wrong, is not realistic, and it sets a really bad expectation on what it is. It's like the computer hackers on TV that can type faster than, we all know computers are slower than I am. Like, why is this computer hacker like that fast on TV? It's not realistic, and it sets a bad precedent for people who think, oh, well, I know what hacking is, and I can, I can hack in like 2 minutes. Why aren't you there yet?
Yeah, that is
Not
so true
realistic.
about the hackers there in movies. My God, the guy clicks 7 times and we're already in Homeland Security Service. You're like, what?
Yes, exactly. Or
Oh
they
my
could just
God.
Well,
guess a password and like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I know what the password is.
my wife and I just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Most people can't even stay together for 5 years now. So I praise you, my friend.
It's a little more common than you think because the way they skew the divorce records,
yeah.
the marriage. We were counted once back in 1975, and we haven't appeared in the statistics since.
Oh shit. Okay.
So all those people that are successful don't quite get into the divorce versus marriage statistics.
Yeah, that oh my God.
You can't fix everything.
Mhm.
There are things that happen in life that can't be fixed. There are things that you can't apologize for. There are things you can't go back and undo. And as much as it would be nice to do that, you kind of have to live with the consequences of your mistakes.
Absolutely. And life is not fair is so true to the highest degree. Welcome back on our Rumbling Facts podcast, where uncomfortable truths collides with critical thinking for raw, unfiltered conversation that drive real fucking growth, people. This is the #1 destination to challenge the script, dive into issues that most people are going to shy away from, and spark the kind of mindset shift that actually moves you towards your goals. I'm your host, Sam, aka DjRetsam, a rapper, creator, and truth seeker, and the founder of the nonprofit Making Others Read. I take unwanted books that people have and give them back to the communities. We've given back over 100,000 books in the last 3 years by myself, because knowledge is fucking power. If you can give advice or just do something just to help others because life is hard, well, that should be your direction, because everybody's going to go through this hard life that we go through. And I've been through personally hell and back myself, through addiction, blackmail, PTSD. I'm not saying that for pity people. I'm saying that because I went through the darkest moments of life there, and I came out fucking louder, wiser, and more determined than ever to help you guys break through this hard life that we are in. Today, we're joined by a truly remarkable guest. There we go. Elgin Hushbeck. With 11 books under his belt, Elgin dives deep into politics, history, and religion and critical thinking, offering unique insights on some of the most pressing issues that we face today. His background spans in engineering, Christianity, and apologetics, and an MBA, and his work with NASA includes the Voyager Flight Team. This speaks to the incredible range and expertise, but it's not just Elgin's impressive credentials that make him the perfect guest for our show. What makes him and his co-host Larissa Munz truly stand out is their commitment to tackling uncomfortable truths head on, instead of focusing on the division that we are facing today. They seek to foster understanding and create consensus around some of the most polarizing issues of this time. They challenge the conventional thinking, refusing to shy away from the hard discussion that push the boundaries of what we know today. So let's welcome the both hosts of Into the Desert, Elgin and Larissa. Welcome to Rumbling Facts Podcast. How you guys doing?
Thank you. Doing great.
Thank
you for that introduction. That's wonderful.
I really appreciate that. So you were an Air Force brat, meant that you were constantly on the move because your father was in the military?
Yeah, he was in the Air Force. In fact, I was born in England. Don't remember much of that. You probably picked that up from my accent because we left when I was 18 months old.
Oh, wow.
Went to El Paso, went to Pennsylvania, went to California, went to Ohio, went to California, went to Tennessee, went back to California, where I transferred around a couple of times. In fact, I moved my senior year of high school. So I went through 3 years of high school, and then my senior year, we transferred. To a high school you probably have seen. If you ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that was the high school I went to for the first 3 years.
Oh, really? Wow. Wow, I'm going to look that up.
Any demons there. No hellmouth.
For sure.
Yeah, we had a lot of people tell us, "Oh, you got to watch the show. It's really good." So we started watching it, and I'm like episode 3 or 4, and it's like, wait a minute, I had German in that classroom.
Wow. Your life must have been like, since you're moving all the time, like adapting to the new cities, new schools, like all the time. So your childhood was completely different than most people.
Yeah, and it was also the 1960s, which was a very tumultuous time. I basically graduated from high school in 73. So my real formative years were probably 65 to 75. And that is, everyone, you think things are bad now, go look at the year 1968 and look at all the things that happened in that year. That was a really, really tough time for the country.
I heard that your parents had a huge influence on you. How detrimental were your parents in your view of life and politics and loving this country?
Well, they weren't really detrimental, other than the fact that they moved me around every few years. Mm-hmm. But I did learn a lot from that. Of course, my dad was in the Air Force, and so I, had a commitment to service. And I went into the Air Force when I, became like 19, I think it was when I went in. And then from my mother, she was always extremely involved in politics. The earliest memory that I can actually put a date to is the election night, 1960. Wow. So I remember that because my parents made me go to bed instead of letting me stay up and watch the election results. So I remember being mad at that. So that I learned an involvement in politics early on. My mother was very involved more on the volunteer side. So she was very active, although later in life, she actually took more of a formal position. She ended her career, so to speak, as the party chairman for the state of Nevada, because that's where they ended up settling later in their life. And as an elector in the 2000 election, Nevada went last when they cast the electoral votes. And she told me she cast the vote that put Bush over the top to become president.
Wow. And since she was in politics for so long, so back then, like in those times, there wasn't a lot of female like in politics, eh?
There was on the volunteer side.
Okay.
Oh yeah. In terms of elected officials, maybe not, but in terms of volunteer and the more the grassroots organizations, there was a lot of women involved in that.
Wow. Because I talked to somebody in the sportscaster world, and she was one of the pioneers of doing sportscasting for women. She was one of the first, and her mom was in the news before giving out news. And we're talking about her mother like in the 40s. And she was like one of the first, her mother. And when she wanted to go in sportscasting in the 70s, well, even her mother was against the idea. Even if she was a pioneer herself, she was like, "Oh no, there's no girls in sport." I'm like, well, damn.
It could be, it could be because she knew how hard it was going to be.
Yeah, she knew that those doors were hard to open for sure.
But then, one of the things is my official residence for my first 16 years of life was Buffalo, Wyoming, and Wyoming was the first state to give women the vote.
Wow, I didn't know that. I feel that. That's what's crazy about this world. It's like we evolve so much with technology and stuff like that, but like black men rights, it just appeared in the last 100 years. The woman rights just appeared in the last 100 years. Like, what the fuck were we doing for 2,000 years? It's like we're all humans. Everybody should have the same right, the same protection, and the same right to vote as well. But that when you look back at history, it's so sad of how we discriminated and pushed people out of not giving them rights there.
Well, you have to think the whole concept of rights is only about 300 years old. So, you go back, if you go back to the Middle Ages and you start talking about human rights, nobody would have the foggiest idea what you're talking about.
That's
definitely
sure.
not in Rome. That's for sure.
No. And Rome, back then, it wasn't racial. Unfortunately, the racial aspect of this is sort of a innovation of the Americas, because people didn't make the racial distinctions. They made cultural distinctions, they made ethnic distinctions, but they didn't so much make racial distinctions. It was American slavery that was so divided on racial lines that introduced that. That's what makes American slavery so horrendous, is it divided people by race. It was economics or coincidental in the sense that they were taking the slaves from Africa and bringing them over here. So there obviously was a built-in racial component, but it wasn't the slavery. Slavery has existed everywhere. And, it was seen not in racial terms, but seen more in power structures. We conquered you, therefore you must be weak, therefore you deserve to be slaves. Wow. And the slaves would look at it as, we got conquered, therefore we must be that. That's all we're good for is slaves. And it was a power thing more than a racial thing. The other aspect that built into that was in the late 19th century, early 20th century, was a whole concept of eugenics coming into the whole aspect of it. And you had issues of, for example, Virginia didn't pass their Racial Integrity Act, which outlawed interracial marriage, until 1924. Why did they wait so long?
Wow.
And they did it because of eugenics, and eugenics saying you got to keep the gene pool pure, and crazy ideas like that.
Wow. What were you going to say, Larissa?
Yeah, I was going to say that even in Africa, the idea of slavery started with African tribes conquering other African tribes, but then they just had these beautiful, rich British people and Spanish people who would come in and say, "Oh, can we buy these people? Because we could have them do work for us." And, they're like, "Oh, so not only do we conquer people and get slaves, but now we're going to make money off of these people too." And so it just exacerbated a problem.
Yeah, it was really, like you said, Elgin, the power structure, because right when you have control over that person because of the land or whatever, well, if people just get in line, we weren't seeing it like, there's a black guy, he's automatically that's his job that I need to put him in. It's really like, we took you over, so we're gonna take you. Yeah. During your teaching at University of Phoenix and Rosemunson, that's how you say it, college. You taught critical thinking. Let's talk about this a bit. Was this, you wanted to do this, or it came back from the school board that they wanted the teachers to teach that to the kids?
Well, I've always had a love for critical thinking, although originally it was logic. Back in the 1960s, I watched Star Trek when it was on primetime TV, and I like Spock and the whole concept of logic. And so I always wanted to take a logic course when I got to college. And when I got to college, finally around to doing it, it was in the early 80s. And I took a course on logic, and I just loved it. And that just grew. Epistemology, which is the philosophy of how you know what you know. I'm a strange guy in the sense that that's always been of interest to me. I can talk to pretty much anybody across the political spectrum, with the exception of, I find it hard to talk to people who feel like I didn't get my point across, so let me raise my volume a bit and see if I can get it across that way.
Yeah.
That's not the only type of person I can't talk to, but across the political spectrum, I can talk to very much anybody. And probably one of the reasons for that is I'm not as interested in converting them into what I believe, but I'm interested in finding out why they believe what they believe.
So you were the one that integrated that into school?
Well, there was already, logic is
logic, but
it goes back,
pushing critical thinking.
It goes back to Aristotle. I mean,
okay.
In the Middle Ages, you wouldn't take a course on critical thinking; you would take a course on rhetoric. It was called rhetoric all the way up into the 20th century. It was basically, how do you form arguments? How do you give speeches that are persuasive? How can you construct ways? You'd learn about fallacies and what are good and bad ways of arguing a position. Then that sort of went away. Now it's called critical thinking. So it wasn't anything new. It was nothing I created, but it was just something that was interest to me. And University of Phoenix, when I started teaching for them, they had a course on critical thinking, and I volunteered to teach it. And eventually I got to the point where I was teaching other teachers how to teach it.
Wow, that's incredible. I didn't even know that we had schools pushing critical thinking, because when you look at elementary schools and high schools, especially in Canada, since I'm here, well, we have nothing like that. And I think we should push critical thinking to elementary school, like literally, because school there since the beginning until end of high school. Well, they're never telling you figure out this by yourself. No. They're like, this what's happened. If you remember that perfectly, you're considered smart. Well, like we're supposed to just take it, swallow it, and that's it. So it never pushes us to do our own research, retest it, and make sure it works again. And I think that's what really breaks through for people there, because right when you start critical thinking, those are the people that are really get out the box and really do a change in this life. Because I felt when I was a kid that they're just all trying to put us in the same mold. And I was telling my mom, I'm like, I'm OCD, but I didn't know back then. I just didn't understand why some people were considered smarter than me, when I know, let's say I would do an IQ test, I would destroy them. And I wasn't like, oh, I'm smarter, and you're not smart. It's just, I was like, this is not the way that you should teach somebody to make him learn something. Really, it's really, if do you remember it? That's the skill really for high school. So do you think that critical thinking should be maybe started a bit earlier than college and university?
Can I take this one?
Yeah.
So this is something I actually feel very strongly about, because, and we've talked about this in some of our own podcasts on YouTube, where if you look at technology today and you look at what technology requires of its users to be effective, it requires critical thinking. And I struggle with the fact that, I mean, even in my own schooling, the idea of you had to memorize names and dates when it came to history. And I hated that, because the story is what's more important, right? And understanding what happened first and what happened next and why things happen and how you go from one event to the next event to the next event, and those dominoes is what needs to be learned. And being able to analyze that and think about how that applies to today. And you can do that with literature, you can do that with history, you can do that with math, you can do that with science, right? It all requires you to be able to look at something that happened before and analyze how that applies to today. And the fact that they are not teaching that to our children is handicapping them. And you get an entire generation. This was literally our last video. You have an entire generation who doesn't know that AI doesn't have all the answers. And so you literally have a lawyer who uses AI to generate a brief and submits it to the judge. And the judge is like, these cases don't exist. Well, we didn't realize that because we were just using AI, and we didn't realize AI didn't have a real argument. I mean, you're lawyers, guys. You're supposed to be the smartest of us all. How do you not know that you have to double check it? It's not infallible.
Talk about laziness. It's like you got somebody helping you. The least you could do is recheck the work.
Yeah, it's like, Back to the Future. Well, I have to have time to recopy, right? Biff is like always saying he has to get the homework so he can recopy. Well, it's kind of the same thing with AI. You can't have AI do the homework and not check it over and put it in your own words and your own handwriting.
Absolutely. With your 11 books published on a variety of topics, because I'll check them out. What's been the driving force of you starting writing? And is this simply a passion to sharing your knowledge with others?
It's part of it. I mean, in all honesty, one of the reasons I write is I write primarily for myself. If I take a topic, it's like I start thinking about how can I communicate this to somebody else? And so I start thinking about it, and I try to write it down in a way that would be convincing. But in the process, I have to do a lot of research. And so I have to go in and find out all the various, facts. Even in a casual conversation with somebody, you could say something like, well, there was this lawyer who did this, right? And that's fine. And that's, we trust each other. And that's, almost certainly the case. However, if I'm writing that in a book, I can't say, well, there was this lawyer who said. I have to go find the case. I have to get the citations and make sure I do it accurately. By the way, I find that very fundamental, because important, because when I do that, probably a good 70% of the time, I end up finding that the case is actually better than I thought it was. And, so I can go through it and I can, make my argument even stronger. Sometimes I find out I had misunderstood it and it's bad, which I consider a win, because I don't want to be out there. I mean, putting things into print is dangerous, because when I write something down or you put it out on a video or a podcast or something, it's recorded, and someone can come along later, and what you did off the top of your head, they can put 3 hours of research in and show you were wrong. And so you have to be fairly careful. So the reason I write, the reason I started my first books on Christianity was because I grew up an atheist and only became a Christian later in life. And a lot of that was evidence-based. And why did I do this? And, am I correct? And so I started working at all the evidence. My third book, which is Preserving Democracy, that came out of my teaching, because I was teaching critical thinking in class, and the students, they just didn't know anything. They didn't know the fundamental basics of the American government, of American history. They just, why we do what we do. And so I tried to lay that out, and that's a tough thing to do in a non-partisan way. So I tried to make sure I was pulling in, fundamental arguments, but not making them partisan, and was like us versus them. But it's more, this is why the American government is laid out. I actually make some pretty, definitive statements in that, but I don't do them as they're wrong, I'm right. This is why. And so that's where that book came out. Some of my other ones, some of my publisher asked me to write. The book on the Constitution, he wanted to start a whole new line of books aimed at high school, college era homeschooling type situations. So he asked me to write the first book in that series, which was on the U.S. Constitution. So I did that as a history of how did the Constitution come to be, and how has it changed over the years up to today? And I find going into the fundamentals like that very beneficial, because a lot of the things we argue about, like the Supreme Court made a good decision or a bad decision, or that judge is radical or not radical, it's usually because you're really saying is that judge agrees with me, that judge doesn't agree with me. But if you go down into the why are they ruling the way they do, you do find out there are two fundamentally different ways of looking at the Constitution that are active in the United States today. One is the living Constitution, which is the Constitution grows and expands and develops along with the culture as it goes along. And the other is what they call strict construction, which is, it means what it meant to those who passed it. And if you want to change it, there's an amendment process. And that accounts for most of the differences between what we would call liberal judges versus conservative judges. It's not so much they're being political, it's that they're following different philosophies. But if we don't discuss the philosophies, then we don't as a people get to make a decision as to what should be the way to look at the Constitution.
Absolutely. And I totally understand your feeling when you're writing a book and you're like, damn, I can't write something that's just, you need facts and you need to recheck everything. And that's what I appreciate of doing music, because you can go on that creative side and I can invent anything and nobody can say, well, that's not factually correct. Well, I hope so, bro. It's a creation. But when I do a podcast on my own of a subject, oh boy, so sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to be here for 2 hours just doing this research. And there's some I was there for 5-6 days straight and I was deep the rabbit hole and I was like, oh my God. And it never ends because, man, I want the complete package. So I want the view of that person, the view of here, and really combine everything, find articles, go in government archives, find everything I can to when I'm going to do the podcast, learn, like you said, yourself of learning what you're going through and really put out a great product. Because if you don't care about the product you're putting out, like, what's the point?
It does make for, my publisher and I have had these conversations where, should I put more red meat in my writings, get people angry and stuff, and because that's what sells. People they complain about partisanism, but then they, when you put a book out that just actually lays things out in a nonpartisan fashion, it's hard to get noticed because you didn't say anything crazy or so. And we've always concluded at the end that that's just not me.
Because the shock factor in videos, books, and everything, that's the seller. Because no matter if the person hates you and never going to buy the book, oh, that person's going to talk to 30 people about that book. That's crazy. And there's 8 of them that's going to buy it, and that just continues. So for sure, the shock factor in movies as well, that's what people remember. You guys discuss
people who review my books. I don't care whether you write a good review or a bad review. Exactly. Bad reviews, dirty little secret, bad reviews can sell books just as well as the good reviews.
I would say the same if somebody took the time to review one of my songs. Like, I don't care if you don't like it. I appreciate so much just the time for you to put it on, because you get a new viewership. And that's important when you're trying to grow or trying to spread knowledge there. You need people that are going to re-talk about it. You guys often talk about how religion intersects with politics, and you guys view, does religion really have a role in politics, and or should we keep it maybe separated?
I would say definitely they have a clear guiding. I don't agree that you should have a country that is dominated by a single religion and forces everybody to follow that religion. That's not what religion is. But religion guides every step that you make, every decision that you make, whether you're going to do it with integrity, whether you're going to do it to make money, whether you're going to do it for the betterment of the masses or for your own personal goals. But religion has a big basis in how you look at things and how you look at the world. And at least for the Christian religions, I can't speak to all of them, but the ones I know about, they really do focus on the betterment of the world and giving back and denying the self and helping those that are in need. And if you run your government with those moral guidelines, with those moral basis, you will have a better government than if you're trying to do something that's selfish or, that's looking out for number one.
Obviously.
I'd add
go ahead.
Yeah, and add on that, the thinking of the founding fathers in America was, obviously you have to have some sort of control over people, in the sense that you don't want people just running off and stealing from everybody. We want some guidelines within the culture, and some of those guidelines are social. In other words, we used, for example, stigma. You don't steal from your friends because you don't want your friends to be mad at you, right? You want them to be your friends. Mm-hmm. Some of them are a little bit more important, and then some of them are so important that we put the power of the state behind them, and that's what we make into laws. So when you make a law, what you're basically saying is, this is so important, we want to back it up with the power of the state. So the founding fathers were looking at this, and they were very, very big on liberty. And they knew that, stigma wasn't enough, particularly when, someone moves into a community. Well, they have no ties to the community. What's to keep them from stealing from everybody?
Yeah.
So, they needed something that would control people's behavior and make people, be nice to each other, essentially. But they didn't want to put the power of the state behind it. They saw that role filled by religion. And so they wanted to set up an environment where religion, and if you read the writings of the founding fathers, in fact, in most people of that era, they would say religion is important to give people guidelines on how to live their lives. Even if they didn't believe in God, if they were deists or they were atheists, they would still say that. So the founding fathers set up a system of encouraging religion within the people, but not having an established church. So no one church or one religion would have the power to oppress all the others, because that is just as much a tyranny as an oppressive government. So they wanted a multitude of religion to provide that voluntary framework without having to have the state step in. And if you look at countries around the world, countries with strong pluralistic religions tend to be freer countries because they don't need government to pass all those laws to tell everyone exactly what to do.
Yeah.
People are behaving themselves
Absolutely.
because of the religious beliefs, because most religions have some version of the golden rule, and
exactly.
You're going to find exceptions in everything, but that was the thinking of the early founding fathers. And you see that when you go to states that don't have religion, or they tend to have a much, much bigger government because they need a bigger government to be able to regulate the behavior in that space that religion would take care of. Mm-hmm. So, there's definitely an interplay between the two, but it shouldn't be, well, my religion is true, so my religion should be the government.
Mm-hmm.
That's a sure sign for problems.
And that is so true about the golden rule that you said right there. I think it was Eddie Griffin, the stand-up comic. He's like, they try to tell us, okay, you're in disbelief. I believe in God. So they try to separate us. But he's like, look at these religions, people. Like the point is, I don't care what you believe in, but did you get the message? Did you get the message? Because if you didn't, that's the problem, because you need to get the message. It's the same message. Don't do to others what you don't want to get done to you. That's it. So if you don't get the message, like, that's the problem. It's not the religion. It's not, oh, you believe in Allah, I mean God. No. But did you get the message? Don't fuck with me. I won't fuck with you. It's that simple. And that is so true. When I started looking at religions initially, I would have thought that they would have everything different. So like, no, the same rules on the same side. No, on different sides. I wouldn't have thought that. And when you look at it, well, that golden rule thing is almost in most of them, because that's how humans should be. Like, we should never do something to someone that we don't want people to do to us. It's that simple. You guys focus on building a consensus and not a division. But you're not against, at the same time, of a two-party system that so many criticize. Can you tell us a bit why, since you guys obviously want less division, but you're still okay with that two-party system? Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. I mean, everybody has essentially, they have to come up with a solution to a particular problem at least in a democracy. If you're a dictator, you don't have to worry about this.
Yeah.
But if you're in a democracy, you've got to figure out, okay, you've got 340 million people in the United States, right? We have one president. So how do those people end up deciding on a single person to be president? And you can have a parliamentary system where you have all the parties vote, like they have in Britain. I think that's what you have in Canada, where you vote for your parties, and then your parties get together and they work out who's going to be the number one person. That's one way of doing it, and people like multiple parties. They can vote for it. The problem is you don't actually get to vote for who's going to be your prime minister. Mm-hmm. You vote for the party, and you hope the party votes for your person, but they could side with the opposition and suddenly you voted for someone you didn't want.
Yeah.
In the United States, what we essentially do is we have two parties, which all that coalition building that they do after the election in a parliamentary system, we effectively do before the election. So, we tend to think of the Republicans and the Democrats as single entities, but they're not. They're coalitions of groups and multiple groups. In the Republican Party, for example, you've got the more establishment wing, the Bush type Republicans, and then you got your conservatives, and then you've got some libertarians, and then you got some more, fringe people. And then, same thing in the Democrats. You've got the progressives, you got the moderates, you've got labor, all these various groups inside. So the coalition forms before the election, and then you vote for your party's nominee at the election. So at least you get the chance to vote for it. The whole purpose is to build consensus. Now, the problem is before the 1990s, we had election season and then we had governing season. And it was a roughly 80-20, 20-80 type situation. But effectively, during campaign season, your sole goal is to defeat the other side. And then after campaign season, then you work to govern. So you have to work with these people for the next, in the House of Representatives, next 18 months until the next election season. Well, what happened in the 90s is we went to what something is called the continuous campaign, and they stopped campaigning. It stopped having governing season, and they just campaigned all the way along. And that's what's built the division that you see, and it's kind of somewhat reinforced itself. It's the division that's the problem. It's not the two parties. It's the fact that we're focusing on defeating the other side all the time. And in a democracy, you can't have that. The whole point of a democracy is you've got to get the people to come together and reach a consensus, right? And it may be a 51% consensus, but it used to be if you were putting together a bill and you wanted to get it through the Senate, your sole concern was to get, the 60 votes to get you past the filibuster. If you get past the filibuster, you're golden. Or in the House, you got to get 50 plus one, 50% plus one. That was the sole goal. It used to be if you could make a couple of changes and get a 60 or 70% of the other party voting for you, that was even better. And today, the parties don't work with each other, so it's really hard to build that sort of consensus. They're focusing more on defeating rather than on building consensus. And that's what's causing the problems in our society with American democracy is we're constantly trying to defeat the other side. And you can't have a democracy where that happens, because eventually what's going to happen is one side's going to get so afraid of the other that they'll basically impose a dictatorship to keep the other side from ever coming to party. You lose your ability to actually have a democracy, and you end up with a one-party state, and that doesn't benefit anybody except the one party.
The only why the reason I asked that is because they force us to choose if we're on the left or right. So right away you divide people like that in a way there, and because I would be thinking like if you destroy the two parties, there's no more parties, and we're all voting for one person, because let's not kid ourselves. Every person is unique in their own way. Any president that we had, he doesn't believe all the liberal things that he's pushing or actually that he's behind. So that's why I think that having like no parties and just voting for that individual could be beneficial, but there's some benefits in having those two systems compared to that one system.
Yeah, there is a real difference, however. I mean, we do have a political spectrum. There is a left and there is a right. And there are reasons that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and Biden are over there on the right, and Bush and Ted Cruz and some others are on the left and then on the right, because they actually have agreement. And if you look at, unfortunately, we've divided the political spectrum between communists and Nazis. And that it's an arbitrary way of doing it, so it's as good as any. But as I write in my book, Seeking Truth, it doesn't help you. It doesn't tell you anything. A much better way to do it, and what is once more historically accurate, is to look at why are people on the left or why are people on the right. And it goes back to the difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution, traces all the way up to today. But if you divide people on, two issues, one is how big, and two, what's more important, the individual or the group?
The group, for sure.
See, that puts you on the left.
Oh boy, and I'm not on the left. Okay.
Because we look at it more, I don't like to phrase it individual versus group, because I would agree the group is more important, right? We want the society to grow and be better, but it's more of, are we looking at freedom versus control, right? And if you want people to have more freedom, then that means there's less control over your choices. And so that's how I see it. But I don't think you could ever have a one-party system, because people have different beliefs, right? Yeah. There are people that really believe that you should not have the individual freedom. You should have someone who tells you what to do, and everybody should work for the good of the whole. And, then you get to extremes like in Russia, where you're born and they're like, okay, you're going to be a doctor and you're going to be a street sweeper. That's kind of arbitrary, right? Just because you need more street sweepers than doctors, that's how your job gets assigned. And then where's your motivation to do that? So in our society, the way it was designed is, you get to choose what you want to do. And if you work harder, you will succeed. If you want to be lazy and just get by, then that you get those consequences. And it's the consequences of the effort that you put behind your life that makes the determination of how you succeed or fail in life, in your job, in whatever you pursue.
Yeah. Do you guys know how we could bridge the political and cultural divides that we see today, especially with the country so divided?
Talk to each other.
Talking.
Communication is the key to success. People subscribe to a goddamn channel.
When you get to the center, they actually overlap. And you have the exact same. If you could find the mythical person who is exactly in the middle of left and right, that person would want a moderate government, and with a focus that equal the group and the individual. When I say group and individual, I'm basically saying individual liberty and group equality, because it's you could put it as freedom versus equality. Freedom and equality are mutually exclusive. You can't have both. You can have a nice meeting point where you kind of get both. So when you get to the center of the spectrum, you have a balance. But at any question, which is more important, individual freedom or group equality? And the more you go for individual freedom, the less you will have group equality. The more you go for group equality, the less you will have individual freedom. And as you move further along those lines, that's where the political spectrum comes out. For example, the difference between a moderate and a conservative is a conservative emphasizes more freedom and smaller government. As you move further and you get to libertarian, even more freedom and even less government. And eventually, when you go all the way to the end of the spectrum to the right, you end up basically in a cabin in Idaho, not to cast aspersions against Idaho, but you end in a cabin somewhere in the West saying, I don't respect any government authority. I mean, you're a government unto yourself and you're completely free to do whatever you want to do. That doesn't work for a nation of 300 million people. So where do you exactly fall on that spectrum? If you go all the way to the left, you end up with a totalitarian government in the form of communists, and the government controls everything and owns everything. Not everybody on the left is a communist. And as you move back, you find socialists. You move back even further, you find people who they want strong government control, but they do value individual liberty. And eventually you get to the center where you've got that mythical person who's exactly balanced on where those go out. The other aspect is this is going to change. The reason that person is mythical is it will change from issue to issue to issue. In some issues, people will want more government control. In other issues, people will want less government. So the person's mythically in the center on one issue isn't going to be mythically in the center on another issue. So the only way to resolve all that is let's have discussions, and let's have discussions centered around why we want more liberty or more control, and where can we find a center middle ground where we can get a 70% consensus. We're never going to get 100, but where can we get a 70 or maybe even an 80% consensus that we can all agree on? Because if you can pass a law that has a 70 to 80% consensus, it's unlikely to change at the next election.
For sure.
Pass a law with a 51% consensus. As soon as the other party gets in, they'll pass it the other way. And instability
and it's a flip-flop for years.
Instability in the law will lead to instability in society. So I think that's, the answer is actually in some respects very simple. Talk to each other, except because of the demonization, that's something we've actually lost the ability to do. It's hard to, we unfriend people on Facebook if they don't vote for the right candidate, or they vote for the wrong candidate. So
absolutely. After the first election of Trump against Hillary, my God, you were seeing this division for the first time, like to the highest degree. Like nobody was hiding it. they were like, how can all you garbages like naming the half of the country vote for one person? And I was like, wow, like literally this person like thinks that half of the country is literally lunatics, like not even worth to talk to. It's like it's incredible. So for sure they're not going to take their advice if they think that they're fucking crazy.
And I would even argue that it started even in the 2000 election with Bush, Gore, and Nader, and the whole Florida, Miami-Dade County voting debacle. And like, the left is out to do the votes, and no, the right's out messing up the votes. Like, no, it's just, that's our democracy.
Yeah. Well, that was a conflict between, two things. Count every vote was what Democrats were saying, and the Republicans were saying, don't change the rules after the election. Well, you couldn't have both. There was no way to count every vote the way the Democrats wanted without changing the rules after the election. So which is more important, counting every vote or changing the rules after the election?
I would say counting the votes, honestly.
Then how do you know what's a legitimate vote?
Yeah, for sure. So we're in the uncomfortable truth section. So I'm going to ask you a question that makes you think of your life and get an uncomfortable truth out of YouTube. So you could have completely two different answers. What's a deeply uncomfortable truth that you guys have to face about your own bias in your life?
That's a tough one.
It's okay not to have an answer there.
Well, in the sense I somewhat do, because one of the things that I like talking to other people is they're better at seeing my flaws than I am. And so I've spent a large part of my life talking to people that would point out things to me. And it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. That's something I got to fix. And so, here I am now. I'm 69 years old. I've been doing this for a long time. So it's like, if I knew it, I would have already fixed it.
Larissa, do you have one?
I don't know. I think for me, contradiction is kind of the hardest thing. And, life is full of contradictions, but trying to figure out, I like equality. I like liberty. How do you have both? And figuring out where I lie, especially, in Christianity, you have this idea that God has everything predetermined, but then we also have free will. Okay, so what does that mean when I'm faced with a choice on what I'm going to do with my life? How do I make decisions when I'm not even sure where I fall on these lines through the contradictions?
What's an aspect of politics that you believe is misrepresented in movies and media? That one's easy. You said the right.
Right. Yeah.
I was thinking the idea of utopia.
Yeah. There was a study a few years ago where they looked at, TV. The person most likely to commit a murder on TV is a CEO. Because, and you think about how many CEOs have committed murder? I mean, we literally have an example recently of a CEO being killed and murdered in the streets of New York. And, if you look at why does that happen, why is capitalism so reviled and routinely rejected on college campuses? You see this in movies. If you look at, to me, the press has been biased for a long time. I remember watching, Walter Cronkite and people saying he's really, straight down the line. I'm going, no, he's on the left. And they say, how do you know that? Because I can tell by listening to him.
Yeah.
And then he retired and started going on the speaking circuit, and people were, wow, he's really on the left. It's like, really? You're only seeing this now? So the press has been biased for a long time, very long time. And what's only changed is really with the 2000 election, and these are stats in my book, it was probably the last close to fair election. It used to be they were biased most of the year, and then as they got towards election, they would sort of clean their act up and be kind of fair up to the election.
Yeah.
And so in 2000, they were still that way. But when you go to 2004, it markedly shifted. They were much more favorable to Democrats and much more negative on the Republicans. And then you go to 2008, the same thing. And then when we got to 2016 with Trump, they basically tossed out all the rules, and they became openly. They said, a number of reporters actually said, we can't be objective any longer because Trump is so bad. We have to be, take sides. Mm-hmm. And so they became very blatant about it, which is why you ended up with all the various hoaxes. I'm not a MAGA person. I mean, I hope I try to be objective. So there's some things he does I like, and there's some things he does I don't like, which in these days, it seems to, if I'm talking about things that he does that I like, well, I'm obviously MAGA. And if I talk about things that I don't like, well, I'm obviously, in the far left wing camp. So it's like, no. I'm actually in the middle.
Yeah. And I just have an opinion.
I seek out sources. I mean, if you're watching a source and they're 100% negative or even 90% negative on somebody, unless they're talking about Hitler, that's a completely separate thing. But if you're talking about a modern political figure, if they're 90% negative, then, or 90% positive, then
you're on the wrong channel.
You're listening to a biased source.
Exactly.
I listen to biased sources.
Me too, because you can't create a good opinion without knowing both sides, for sure.
Yeah, I actively seek out both sides, but I also seek out particular voices that I see are, they go both sides on an issue.
They can admit an error.
And when they're over here, they give a very reasonable reason they're over on one side, and then on the next time they're on the other side, they give a very reasonable answer on the other side. Mm-hmm. People like Alan Dershowitz. He's a lawyer. I watched him for a large part of my life. I don't remember when he came into my consciousness, but he's a person on the left, but he's also a very principled person and will stand up for rights in a very, very consistent way. And so, he actually became a lawyer for Trump on some cases because he didn't like what was happening to Trump. It's not because he likes Trump.
Yeah.
Clearly doesn't. But
he just saw something that wasn't right and he did something.
Andrew McCarthy is another lawyer that I see this, sometimes he comes down and he say, I think Trump's got a good case here. On the other times, like this morning, he's saying, I don't see how Trump's going to win this one.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that's what you need, because if you're just going with, oh, I'm okay with everything that Trump says, or no matter what he says is not good, well, those 2 point of views are not good, because everybody has some good and some bad to take from, and everybody gives out information to start give and take and everything. And you, Larissa, do you have an aspect in politics that you feel like is misrepresented by the movies and media?
Aside from the fact that I think only Hollywood can write a good president.
That's so true.
I mean, like, they always know exactly what to say in Hollywood. Like, you know, you see a president, you see a political person, and they're very easy to see who's the bad guy and who's the good guy, because the bad guy's always doing the sneaky stuff and underhanded stuff and is two-faced, whereas the good guy is always with integrity and says the right thing at the right time with the exact right words. And I feel like it's not realistic, because that clear black and white, where I love it in movies, don't get me wrong, is not realistic, and it sets a really bad expectation on what it is. It's like the computer hackers on TV that can type faster than, we all know computers are slower than I am. Like, why is this computer hacker like that fast on TV? It's not realistic, and it sets a bad precedent for people who think, oh, well, I know what hacking is, and I can, I can hack in like 2 minutes. Why aren't you there yet?
Yeah, that is so true about the hackers there in movies. My God, the guy clicks 7 times, and we're already in Homeland Security Service. You're like, what?
Yes, exactly. Or they could just guess a password and like, oh yeah, I know what the password is. Like, no.
Well, Hollywood treats technology as magic, so.
And fighting too. When you look at fighting, somebody hits somebody across the head, he's automatically knocked out on the floor, and they can do anything. It's like, you guys didn't watch UFC before doing this movie. There's guys that get hit in the face 220 times, and they're still standing up like killers. So it's like, in movies, they hit the guy behind the head and they ain't worried about nothing else. They walk away because the guy's out, and he's probably going to be out for 5-6 minutes. What? Like, even in UFC, when the guy gets knocked movie. And when the guy gets knocked out in real combat, like maybe 40 seconds later, he's getting up. So I don't know why movies he's automatically sleeping for days. It's like, what? So for sure, that's a great example for the presidents there.
Yeah, one of my favorite shows is Babylon 5. And Michael Straczynski was asked once, the spacecraft in Babylon 5, one fan asked him, how fast does that actually go? He says, it moves at the speed of plot.
Wow. Well, what's one of the hardest truths that you realize in your career or life?
Probably that life's not fair.
That is so true.
You grow up, in the 60s, all the TV shows had happy endings and everything was fine. And, the good guys always won and blah, 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 blah. And then you go into the real world and, you end up, something happens to you and it's just not fair. And you were wrong. And there's nobody you can do. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just life. And, it is the way it is. So.
And you, Larissa, do you have one?
You can't fix everything. There are things that happen in life that can't be fixed. There are things that you can't apologize for. There are things you can't go back and undo. And as much as it would be nice to do that, you kind of have to live with the consequences of your mistakes.
Absolutely. And life is not fair is so true to the highest degree, because when you're a kid, you always think that, oh, everybody's going to be equal. Everybody's going to have their rights and everything. And that life is, let's say somebody does some bad thing. Oh, life's going to go back and get them. No, it's not like that. It's not because the guy's a criminal, a piece of shit, that life's going to go get him at a certain point. Not all of them, people. When I started realizing that when I was a kid, okay, there were some people that just get away with stuff. Yeah. Because you don't control life, you don't control the rules. So yeah, life is not fair, and that's a a bomb when we learned that when we're like adolescents normally there, when we figure that one out. Like, okay, so I'm not that special like my mom told me. I thought I could be an astronaut in 2 seconds. When you guys look back at the bigger picture, what's something about the world that no one seems willing to confront, but you've realized that it's probably a key to understanding our future? That's a solid one.
I would say is that things are constantly in flux. And I guess there's two things. One, they're constantly in flux. For example, we talked earlier about political parties. The Republican Party today and the Democratic Party today are not the same as they were in the 90s. They're not the same as they were in the 60s. They're not the same before that. We tend to look at things as if they never actually change and that they're monolithic. The other is the 80-20 rule, I think, is we all pay lip service to it, but I don't think we realize how much that really is in fact. When I say, for example, the Republican Party is X or the Democratic Party is Y, I'm not saying every single person in the party is exactly this way. The opposite to that is people, there are people say, well, the Republicans, the Democrats, they're the uniparty. They make no difference between them. No, there actually are significant differences between them. And it doesn't require me to demonize one person, one party or the other. There are Democrats I like. I'm tend to be a Republican, for sure. But there are Democrats I like. I may never vote for them. Luckily, I'm not in their state, so I don't have to vote. I'm not confronted with that particular dilemma. But I have voted Democrat in the past because I just could not stand the Republican. Yeah. And, there are Democrats that I respect and that I think are good people, even if I don't agree with them on political issues. And there's certain Republicans that I would, if you give me the vote, I kick them out of the party.
And Larissa, do you have an answer for that one? Or do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, if you could.
Yeah, no problem. When you look at the bigger picture, what's something about the world that no one seems willing to confront, but you've realized it's one of the keys to understanding our future?
I think it's actually an interesting, because I just had this conversation with my kids this morning on the way to school. Paying attention.
Yeah.
Paying attention to the world, knowing what's going on. Don't take anything for granted. You never know what's going to come up, what's going to hit you, where your next opportunity is going to be, where danger is. Pay attention.
Absolutely. That's some solid shit, because a lot of people are on autopilot in their life, doing their life and not really understanding why rules are the way there is, why there's certain stuff happening around the world. People are just so concentrated in their instant gratification with Instagram and all this life that we have of distractions, technically. So being aware of what's going on and everything is so important. And what's an uncomfortable truth you had to accept about the way success or happiness is really achieved?
There's a large component of luck.
That's so true.
People, particularly people on my side, and people who are very successful, like to think that it's all hard work and they got there through hard work and they worked, and I don't doubt that they worked very, very hard. But they often ignore the component of luck.
Yep.
On the other side, it's people who think it's all luck and no hard work.
Yeah.
That's neither of those positions. Again, it's an 80-20 thing. Neither of those positions are true. Unless you work hard, you will not be able to take advantage of the luck when it comes around.
Exactly. There's a golf player named Gary Player, and he said, it's weird. The harder I work, the luckier I get. And that is exactly so true there. When you work so much, luck will come.
Yeah, you can take advantage of it.
Absolutely.
But it's the bell curve. So, just put a bell curve on virtually anything, right? And you're going to have people at the one end who are very, very successful. Right. You have people at the other end who are just very, very unlucky. There are unlucky people of them. There are, I'm one of those people that just seems to fall through the cracks. So for give you a real quick example, California had a loan program for veterans. So this is back when housing loans were routinely 12, 13%, right, for a home loan. And they had a program for veterans that 2%. Great. We wanted to buy a house, wanted to refinance our house. Let's go get that. And so we go to apply because I'm a veteran, served in the Air Force. And they said, well, you have to be a veteran between certain periods of time.
Incredible.
And so, the Vietnam War era was one of them. The Vietnam War era ended April 30th, 1975. Not a problem. I enlisted and was sworn in on April 3rd, 1975. I'm golden.
Wow.
No, you have to go active duty on that time.
That's incredible.
The Air Force brought me in and then put me on something called delayed enlistment, where I didn't actually go active duty until July.
Wow, but you were still on the paper, so wow.
No, but I didn't get it. I didn't qualify for the loan.
Okay, yeah, wow.
And that's the sort of thing that, in my life, I could give you like 10 or 12, 13 different examples of things like that. So if there's an exception or a clause, I just assume I'm not going to get it. They're talking, for example, they're talking about Trump wants to give out these checks for Doge refunds or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Great, fine. I assume I will not get one. Simply because there'll be a clause that says, except
if your last name is Hushbeck.
So, whatever it will be, I will not qualify. And
we should never expect something. And let's say it does come, whatever, we'll give you the check. But if not, we shouldn't be sad. Like, tell yourself you were already going to manage your life without it.
I'm not sad.
Yeah.
And I'm not complaining of it. It's just the way it is. But I'm just saying, when you have a bell curve, as you have these people that were very lucky, you have these people over here that are very unlucky. For example, if you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers, and he looks at why are people successful, and he does an example of the hockey league in your country, which is extremely merit-based, and it's driven by layer after layer after layer of people who qualify at one layer, get bounced to the next, and you get up to the NHL, and you find out vast majority of people are actually born in January or February.
Oh, fuck, I didn't know that.
And it turns out that's because the cutoff dates for when people can enter in leagues is about that time. Okay. So if you just miss it, that means you can't go into a following year. Well, that means when you do go in, you're 1 year older, you're 1 year stronger, you're 1 year more coordinated against someone who just got in.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have an advantage due to nothing more than the date you were born on.
Wow, that's incredible. And you, Larissa, do you have what's an uncomfortable truth you had to accept about the way success or happiness is really achieved?
I don't know, the luck thing seems like a good answer, but I think a lot of happiness comes from accepting things the way they are, not trying to change things or expect things to be different.
Exactly.
We used to host exchange students, and one of the things that we found is that if an exchange student had thought a lot about what their host family was going to be like and what it was going to be like for them when they got to America, they had less happiness and they had a harder time fitting in. And we had one girl who, she lasted 2 weeks and she was very unhappy at our house. And we were just like a temporary host family because her official host family was out on vacation. And so we had her for a week and a half, and then her host family came and they picked her up. And when she got to their house, it was so much worse than our house was. And she like, nope, I want to go home. Like her expectations were here and reality was down here, and there was nothing anybody could do to make her happy because those expectations just didn't align. So if you can just take things as they are and accept things as they are, you're going to be much happier in life.
That is so true. I tell people that all the time. Oh my goodness. They're like, oh, it sucks. Like guys are like this. They always cheat. I'm like, okay, but that is life there. So it's like you gotta deal with it. It's like for sure it's sad that he cheated, but tell yourself that most guys are probably pieces of shit like that too. Like, you can't tell yourself, oh, the next one's gonna be perfect and flawless. No, most guys, given the choice, and I studied this shit for like 5 years, and most guys, given the choice, if nobody's gonna know, well, it will happen, people. Like when I tell that to a girl, it's like, well, that sucks. Well, obviously that sucks. It's fucking ridiculous, but that's life. So you gotta tell yourself that, yeah, find a man that you love so much that, let's say he does, well, you could deal with it. Because if you tell yourself that he's gonna be flawless and never do an error, well, you're gonna be disappointed most of the time for most stuff. When it comes to creating division, what do you guys think is the biggest and largest role in division? Because I have my own opinion about this, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think.
I would say at the moment, it's going to vary by subject matter. But if you're talking about political division, I would say it's the demonization of the other side. When you have a political campaign and you're in a particular race, it's very easy to exaggerate against your opponent. And this is where this whole concept of campaign season versus governing season used to be is so important, because you'd fight tooth and nail to the election, and then afterwards you just, everybody gets along and everyone governs for a while. Well, what happened is the exaggerations began to be real, at least in people's mind. There are people out there, for example, who think Trump really is a dictator and he's really a Nazi it's like, no, he's a New York developer. And if you actually look at what a developer, a developer is somebody who can look at an empty lot and envision a huge building, and then has the drive to actually make that happen. That's a very unique skill set. I don't think I could do it.
Yeah.
And then you combine that with New York, which I remember the first time I was in New York, we just gotten off our cruise ship and we're getting our luggage, and the New York police officer comes up and he starts yelling at the traffic. And I go, yep, this is New York. It's not exactly Midwest nice, is what we would call people from Wisconsin.
That's why they say if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere in the States. It's because the hardest place.
It was, although my one experience with that, I had to go do a presentation in New York, and we did get the contract in spite of me. So,
and Larissa, what do you think is the biggest division?
I think it's this idea that you're always right, and therefore everyone else must be wrong. And our inability to understand that we're not perfect, and whereas we might be mostly right, it doesn't mean that we are all right, and there are valid points of view across the board. I had a high school teacher who gave me what I would say is the best advice ever. Everybody is doing the best they can to get through the day.
Exactly.
Nobody is out to get you. Nobody is out to ruin your life. They are just doing what they think they need to do to get through the day. And when you see everybody as just struggling to get through the day, you have a different perspective, and you can then understand why people do what they do. You may not agree with it. You may think it's wrong, but they're not evil because they disagree with you.
Yeah, and it creates compassion and understanding for a person that's a piece of shit, because you're like, oh, okay, he's not just a bad person, born bad. No, he's just going through probably a lot right now. That's why he was a dick when he bumped into you and then say shit. And me, with all the research I did in media and stuff like that, I think that the biggest separation is media. It's because that's the brainwash. That's the hypnosis. Because if we all have something at our home is a fucking screen in a corner telling us what to believe is fucking real.
That oblong box in the corner of the room and is constantly telling us what to believe is real. It all starts with, turn that goddamn TV off, son!
And
Or more than one.
yeah, more than one now. And when you look at it, it's really sad. Like, I never seen in my life like the media anti a president all my life. Like, I saw them having a problem sometimes with JFK, some things he said, but just barely, like just a phrase here, a phrase there. We never seen an anti-president like we saw at the beginning of 2015 and 2016. I was shocked. Like, every channel were just fucking destroying Trump constantly. I was like, what the hell? Like, what is this? I never seen this in my life. And every person in Canada was anti-Trump. And I was like, why are you anti-Trump? Because I don't watch the news in Canada. It's fucking boring. And they were like, oh, well, they all say they're bad. When I started analyzing what Canadian television was putting on, well, in the US, you still have the choice of left and right, even if there's more channels of the left. But in Canada, we just take everything the left says, and that's the script, and that's it. We don't even take a grain of salt of the right. No, it's all left. So any Canadian is mostly anti-Trump to the highest degree because they've been fed this stuff there since the beginning. So every time I meet a Canadian that's anti-Trump, mostly all of them, I like to ask them, like, tell me something he said that you didn't like. They don't know. They don't know. They saw a headline that they believe the news, and it's like they can't even back up their beliefs or something because they just accepted. So I think the media is the most dangerous thing that we have, because that is the start, because everybody's on their fucking screen, no matter if it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and anything else. It's in my opinion, that's what's the biggest problem. So next question, what is truth really? Is there a such thing as your truth, or there's only one truth?
Well, I open up
my
my book
on that, Elgin.
Yeah, I open up my book, Seeking Truth, by talking about the philosophy of truth and all the various philosophical views of truth. And in the end, I come down to it's basically truth is that which conforms to reality. And philosophers will tell you there's a lot of problems with that particular view, but I think that's probably the best view, and I know a whole bunch of others, but I think the best view is truth is that which conforms to reality. And if that is your definition of truth, then there's no such thing as my truth or your truth, because there's only one reality.
Exactly.
And if you believe that, then you can't have, I can be wrong, I could be right, I could be partially wrong. And I think that's where we are. Virtually everybody is partially wrong. Nobody knows everything. And therefore, I like talking to other people because I know some of the stuff I believe is wrong. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And so if I talk to somebody that disagrees, then they can help me get rid of the false beliefs I have. And to me, that's the whole core. If you want to boil down seeking truth into just its lowest common denominator, it's learning the process of getting rid of the things that are false out of your belief system. It isn't so much believing what's true, it is getting rid of what's false. And if you focus on that, then you can. It's hard to change a belief that you think is true if it's going to change your position. That's just psychologically a hard thing to do. However, dropping a factoid that you had picked up, like, Trump said such and such. Well, it turns out he didn't, right? The whole what's now known as the fine people hoax, where Trump supposedly said Nazis were fine people. He never said that. And so you can say, well, Trump's terrible, but I can drop the fine people hoax because it turns out to be a hoax. It didn't happen. Maybe if you drop enough of those hoaxes, you may end up reconsidering Trump, but you can't start by reconsidering. If you go to a MAGA person, you say, I want you to realize that Trump's not a good person. It's going to be a very hard sell.
Yeah.
If you start piece by piece and looking at getting rid of the false beliefs, then maybe you can actually have some success there.
because it's like their dad was on a podcast and the girl is like, yeah, but that's your truth. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, but that's your truth. It's not my truth. It's a fact. It's that one truth. And she's like, no, my truth is, and she said whatever she said. I'm like, no, that's not your truth. That's your belief. A truth can't be right. There's only one truth. Like you can say the sky is green and you say that, oh, that's my truth, but it's not really your truth. That's your opinion, and opinion and belief can be wrong. But when you say that's the truth, no, the truth is the sky is blue and that's it. That is the truth. So I believe there's only one truth. Larissa, are you with that opinion?
Absolutely. I do agree that we can't know the truth for every little whatever. Nobody knows how the universe was started, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We have a really good guess, but nobody knows. Nobody can say with 100% absolute proof, and they can't go back and say, well, here, I've got this video of the start of the world, right? Like, it doesn't exist. So we have to take that based off of faith. That's not a truth. That's why they call it the theory, the Big Bang theory, right? The theory of evolution, the theory of
gravity,
whatever, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they're theories. We can't really prove that. So that's not truth. That's a theory.
Exactly.
Truth is things that you can prove. And I don't think we can know the truth at all times in our head, but the more information we get, the more research, the more we pay attention, the more we are open to those ideas from others, the closer we can get to truth.
Absolutely. And that was solid. A lot of people don't mention that without me mentioning of the Big Bang Theory is just a theory. A lot of people thought, well, I thought at the end of high school, I thought that was put in rock, that we figured it out. So it's good, Sam. Don't even check that out. Like, it's all good. And when I was like 23 or something, I started really doing research in this to really learn. And I was like, wow, okay, no, everything's just a theory because we don't know. And I was like, okay, well, why when I go through high school, they're like, okay, by the way, so the facts are the Big Bang Theory happened. I'm like, okay, so they tell us this shit like it's fucking in rock, but actually it's just a theory. Instead of saying that's one of the theories we have, you can have your own and continue. No. They put it like it's a fact. So it's literally brainwashing us to believe that all the theories that they put in those history books are fact. They never put theory in besides those sayings in particular. So
they teach theories as if they're fact, even though they call them theories. We all say the Big Bang Theory. Yeah, it's even in the TV show, The Big Bang Theory. Right?
I was happy that they put it.
People assume that, well, when you say theory, that means fact. No.
So we're going to end with the critical thinking segment. I have 5 questions that is going to make you think critically of the answer, or literally make you look back on critical thinking moments in your own life. So name two things that we should try at least once in our life.
2 things we should try at least once. Going to another country.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You should travel. See something other than where you grew up. Talk to people who didn't you're Canada, you're close, but you still have a different life. Your medical system is different. Your political system is different. Your TV is different, but even someone with a different language. Again, we hosted exchange students, and I've been to Germany, I've been to Portugal, I've been to Ireland and England, and talking to the natives, the people who grew up in those countries, and their views on life has been very eye-opening and has helped me understand our country and why our country does things the way they do, and why England does things the way they do, and why Germany does the things they do. And it's not perfect, right? You just look at healthcare, and you may think it's better because you don't have to pay for prescriptions, but you also don't get to choose your end of life plan.
Mm-hmm. And as well, in Canada, we maybe have a free healthcare, but let's say, for example, somebody's looking for a new doctor. Well, sometimes it takes 5 fucking years, so they give you a doctor. And when, let's say, you go to the hospital just because you sprayed your ankle and whatever, and you just need a little medical care, well, you're considered the less important right there coming in. So you could be there for 48 hours waiting just for a sprained ankle. Compared to US, oh, you're gonna pass quite fast, but you got a bill. So I think. Because a lot of people in Canada, they always complain about that time because we're just wasting time in hospitals. There's one friend of mine that was fucking lazy to shit, so he would go to. Normally, you would go to a clinic, get a paper to not go to work, but he didn't have a family doctor, so he had to go to the hospital. Man, he went to the hospital for a day and a half there, and he came back to work the next day after. They're like, "Hey, where's your doctor paper?" He's like, "Oh, I don't have it." We're like, "Well, go back home. We don't need you then." Like, we're firing him. He's like, "No, wait, what don't you get? I'm in line right now." They're like, "Well, you're at work." No, I'm in line. They said I still have at least 12 hours to go. This shift is 8 hours. I'll get it for tomorrow. And what do you know? The next day, he comes in with a paper of doctor that was signed at 2 a.m. and said he was here for like 40-something hours. Man, I was laughing so much. I'm like, this is gold. This is the Canadian system to the highest degree. What's one of your personal achievement, either in your career or your life, that you two are most proud of?
I would say adopting my kids.
That is beautiful.
One of those things I never thought. My ex-husband and I tried to have kids, and we did everything up to where I felt comfortable, right? There's a line that I didn't want to cross because I didn't want to have to make a choice I wouldn't be able to live with, right? And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not going to have kids. And I would pray and I say, you know what, God, if you want me to have kids, you're going to put them on my doorstep. And I kind of left it like that. And I just assumed I was just never going to have kids. I was going to be one of those people who
because there's no kids that just show up to a place. Can you be our mama?
Well, yeah, except God has a sense of humor. I got a phone call saying it was my ex-husband's half-sister's kids. They were in foster care from severe abuse. I mean, it was horrific what they went through. And they're like, they need a home.
Wow.
Okay, I didn't mean it literally.
I wasn't serious.
You know, and I kind of got to, you know, you get past 30 and you're like, okay, now I'm getting a little old to have kids, but they were meant for me. And they have given me so much. And
I'm sure you gave them a lot as well. That's incredible.
I hope so, but they were a gift of God, and I'm just so proud of them, and just having them in my life and being a part of that story is just amazing. And
you, Elgin, do you have an achievement that you're most proud of?
Well, at the moment, it's that I just, my wife and I just celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Most people can't even stay together for 5 years now. So I praise you, my friend.
It's a little more common than you think, because the way they skew the divorce records.
Yeah.
Marriage. We were counted once back in 1975, and we haven't appeared in the statistics since.
Oh shit. Okay.
So all those people that are successful don't quite get into the divorce versus marriage statistics.
Yeah, that oh my God, that's good to know too. It's eye-opening for sure. What's a surprising theory or conspiracy that you guys believe?
Well, probably the most surprising is I actually don't accept really any conspiracy theories.
Okay.
I used to as a younger kid. You know, I looked into them all. Of course, the JFK. I actually remember distinctly the day he was shot. I remember how I found out about it, and so it was obviously I lived through that entire time span up to now. And at one point, I did think it was a conspiracy, and then again, that concept of being open to rejecting little bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Eventually, it all fell apart, and now I actually think Oswald did it acting alone. So I've not yet seen a conspiracy theory that I think holds water.
And you, Larissa?
Grand conspiracy theories. I'm not talking about
Yeah.
two guys conspire to rob a bank.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah. For sure.
In terms of these dark secret societies that are controlling everything, no, I don't believe in any of those.
And you, Larissa?
I mean, aside from I believe in God, and some people might think that that's a big hoax or a theory.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that there are evil people in this world that are trying to tear us apart.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how much that's conspiracy theory. Elgin and I disagree on this. I think it's a conspiracy theory. He thinks it's not. But I do believe that there are evil people, especially rich evil people, who are trying to tear this world apart.
Absolutely. So final question. Can you guys share an instance where your intuition or gut feeling led you to a decision that probably challenged the traditional logic and expectations? So technically, Larissa, that thing of God about the kids is that is exactly that there, and that is so incredible there. I had the girl that was sportscaster that I talked about earlier. She fighted for career the whole time. So she's 40 something, and she retires from sportscasting and then starts a 20-year career in teaching. Believe it or not, and she was like, too late. I fucked up family, so I'm just keep drive career. She was realizing that most kids didn't have the life that she had earlier. She was like, damn. So she started to become personal with them, trying to help them out even more because they needed it. And she was realizing that they were in bad homes and stuff. And she became a foster mom of 4 of those children that she had in her class, and changed her life.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in life that change your life. I had an example once. So I decided to make a decision of going into IT as a developer back in the early 2000s. And it's still very much a boys' club. And I didn't realize that because it's the 2000s, like equality, women's rights, equal pay. And it wasn't until I went on a couple of interviews and got fired for being a woman that I really realized that there are still people in this world that are biased and are like, I had a manager once tell me, I just didn't know how to manage you. I'm a person. I work hard. I've never had this issue before. Where is this coming from? And, I guess I have different ideas or something than most people. At that point, I decided to get out of development, and I was also getting pigeonholed into antique technologies. And it was really hard for me to learn anything new and be able to advance in technology. If you can't keep up with the latest and greatest, if you can't work on the latest and greatest, you don't have marketable skills. And it's really hard to find a job. And so I got out of that, and actually had the best work management. I had a great boss and great employees, and I felt valued. Like I could actually say something and people would listen to me instead of people dismissing me. And I didn't realize that until after I got out of that environment, how, wow, there really is still differences between how women get treated in the workplace and how men get treated in the workplace for some careers.
Absolutely. And Elgin, do you have an answer for that?
Not really.
It's all good.
I'm
if you
very
don't know.
much a rational guy, so it's hard for me to. I'm sure I probably have at times followed instincts, but
and yet you're an atheist who's now a Christian.
Well, there is that.
So where can everybody find you guys, your socials, your podcast, and Elgin, your books?
Well, hushbeck.com, or for my books, you can just go out there, and I have a blog, and I have all my books listed. Of course, you can always just go out to Amazon or Barnes and Noble or Books A Million or anything like that. Just type my name in, you'll see all the books. You go to Audible, you can get a number of the books. About half of my books are now available on Audible. read by Larissa. And, I'll let her talk about the podcast.
Yeah, so we can be found on intothedesert.info. We are on YouTube, and we are also on Patreon, Into the Desert. YouTube, it's Into the Desert Ideas. And I'm on LinkedIn as well as Elgin, so you can find us out on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Perfect. So thanks again for coming on. It was an honor to meet you guys.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us.
Well, it was my pleasure. So thanks, everybody, and have a great weekend.
That oblong box in the corner of the room and is constantly telling us what to believe is real. It all starts with, turn that goddamn TV off, son. It all starts with closing that shit. Yo, DjRetsam giving you a bit. Critical thinking, don't swallow anything, question everything until you know what you're consuming. Look real on surface, dig a little deeper. Out of nowhere, you're a truth seeker. Do the test, do the research, don't let them gas you up, light you up, manipulate you up. While the lies, the smoky guns, the fires, social and corporate media holds extreme powers. And many tasks, all subject devours. Vinny Paz, end of days and hours. From the Federal Reserve to the Gulf of Tonkin we serve. From the Titanic alleged accident to the moon landings incident. Don't panic, Las Vegas shooting was imminent. To 9/11 was ironic. Fight for logic, change your optic. News is toxic, people on the top are demonic. It's critical to think for yourself. Hypercritical, miracle for your mental health. Question everything, don't believe shit. Look into it, book it, note it. Don't quit, do the research, do the test. Lurch in your chest, it's hard to digest. It may look like a reality, but it's fucking you up mentally. People hooked, accept what they're given. Barely look, swept, no second listen. Just in the backseat to hell being driven. Catch me question, then no answer, no suggestion. Unravel the sheen like a bitch. These dudes are selling you the dream. Don't be their sheep, wake up from your sleep before you're slaughtered alive. In the lies, I can't believe your eyes. Do the data, fuck your Insta, go get a. Fuck your meta, you call your own shots before humans rot. You gotta first take control of your thoughts. See the pattern, you'll intercept and not just accept the falsehoods. Bleeding the minds, they've been feeding you blind since childhood. Misleading the finds, they be keeping you in lines. Rinse Rosewood, always a hidden agenda. That's all truth, no Mandela. It's critical to think for yourself. Hypercritical, miracle for your mental health. Question everything, don't believe shit. Look into it, book it, note it. Don't quit, do the research, do the test. Lurch in your chest, it's hard to digest. Teach others to spread the flickery facts. Don't be the masses that follow activity packs. Critical thinking is the key simply to feel free and keep your dignity.